welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going kind of beyond the usual, spreadsheets and quarterly reports.
Yeah.
And we're going to explore a fascinating side of business that you might not have thought much about, called non-market strategy.
Right.
Non-market strategy.
So that's right. We're really talking about the world beyond just purely economic decisions.
Mm-hmm.
How companies navigate these social and political landscapes to achieve their goals. It's about recognizing that businesses aren't just economic machines,
Yeah.
They operate within kind of a complex web of,
Relationships
and regulations and public perceptions.
Yeah, and all these things. Right. So our source material for this deep dive is a thought-provoking piece from MIT Sloan Management Review called "What Every CEO Needs to Know About Non-Market Strategy."
I like it.
And this article argues that, in today's world, companies can't just focus on the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
They need to actively engage with this non-market environment, anticipating challenges, building alliances, and even shaping the rules of the game to their advantage.
Absolutely.
So they lay out a framework for understanding this called the IA3 framework.
I see.
It stands for issue,
got it,
actors, interests, arena, information, and assets.
That makes sense.
So we'll be using this framework to analyze some real-world examples and unpack the strategic thinking behind them.
Let's do it.
So are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's start with a company you're probably familiar with. Novartis.
Okay.
They faced a major challenge in India back in the early 2000s when the country denied them a patent for their breakthrough cancer drug, Gleevec.
I vaguely remember this.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal.
It was a really big deal.
Something about intellectual property.
Yes.
Rights.
Exactly. Novartis argued that India's patent laws were too restrictive and that they actually violated international trade agreements.
I see.
And they launched this really multi-pronged non-market strategy.
Okay.
They were fighting the decision in court, lobbying government officials, and even running these public awareness campaigns.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's the issue and the arena from the IA3 framework, right?
Yeah.
The issue being the patent denial, and then the arena being, the courts, the government, the public sphere.
Spot on. But here's where Novartis' strategy gets really interesting.
Okay.
So while they were aggressively pursuing this legal battle, they simultaneously launched a program to provide Gleevec to needy Indian patients at a fraction of the cost.
Oh, wow.
And they even highlighted this program in their corporate citizenship initiatives.
So they were fighting tooth and nail for profits on one hand, but giving away the drug on the other.
Yeah.
That seems kind of counterintuitive.
Well, that's the brilliance of it.
Okay.
By making Gleevec accessible to those who couldn't afford it, Novartis effectively neutralized one of their biggest criticisms, which was that they were only interested in profits.
Right.
They recognized the social and political sensitivities surrounding access to these life-saving drugs in a, developing country.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation for sure.
Absolutely.
So by anticipating that criticism and addressing it head on, they were able to gain public support and potentially influence policymakers.
Yeah.
It's like they were playing 3D chess.
Yeah.
Thinking several moves ahead.
Exactly. So they were strategically aligning their market goals, protecting their patent, with their non-market goals, which were building a positive image and garnering public support.
Smart.
This is a key takeaway for any company. Successful non-market strategy often involves finding these win-win scenarios where business interests and social concerns align.
Yeah, I could see how that would be really valuable.
Absolutely.
This Novartis case is a great illustration of the actors and the interest elements of the IA3 framework. Right?
Yeah.
They had to understand the motivations and concerns of the Indian government, patient advocacy groups, even their competitors.
Right. They needed to understand what each actor valued and what kind of information would sway them.
I see.
For example, they used scientific data to support their patent claims in court.
Okay.
But they emphasized compassion and social responsibility in their public messaging.
Right. So very different approaches depending on who you're talking to.
Right.
Speaking of public messaging, let's move on to Toyota.
Okay.
And how they masterfully leveraged non-market strategy to boost sales of their Prius hybrid car.
Ah, yes.
The Prius.
The Prius is a classic case study in shaping consumer perceptions and market dynamics through these non-market actions.
So back when hybrid cars were a novelty, Toyota saw an opportunity to position the Prius as not just a fuel-efficient car, but a symbol
for environmental consciousness.
Yeah. I remember those early Prius commercials. They definitely tapped into that eco-friendly vibe.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't just marketing. Toyota engaged in some savvy lobbying as well, right? They successfully pushed for legislation in California that allowed solo drivers of hybrid vehicles to use carpool lanes, even during peak hours.
Absolutely.
That was a game changer.
It was.
It made the Prius even more appealing to commuters stuck in California traffic, even if they weren't, diehard environmentalists.
Precisely. So they identified a key interest for a specific group of actors. Busy commuters in California, and leveraged their non-market strategy to directly address that interest.
Got it.
So they weren't just selling a car.
Okay.
They were selling a solution to a real-world problem.
I like that. So they strategically chose their arena, the California legislature, and used their assets, their lobbying power, and the growing public concern for the environment to achieve their goals. So they turned the non-market environment into a competitive advantage.
Exactly. And they didn't stop there.
Okay.
They also built these alliances with environmental groups, sponsoring events and research initiatives.
I see.
This helped them solidify their image as a leader in sustainable transportation, further enhancing the Prius's appeal.
So this raises a question for me.
Okay.
How do companies distinguish between their market and non-market strategies? Are they always so intertwined?
That's a great question, and one that we'll explore further as we continue our deep dive.
Got it.
But the key takeaway here is that in today's complex world, the lines between market and non-market are becoming increasingly blurred.
I can see that.
And the companies that can seamlessly integrate the two, like Toyota did with the Prius, will be the ones that truly thrive.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
This is all starting to make sense to me. I'm starting to see how non-market strategy is not just some abstract concept, but a tangible and powerful tool.
I agree.
That the companies can use to shape their destiny.
Absolutely.
But before we move on to more examples and delve deeper into these differences between market and non-market environments, let's hear from our sponsor. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're dissecting this idea of non-market strategy, how companies play the game beyond just selling products. It's like a whole hidden layer of influence.
That's a great way to put it. And as we've seen with Novartis and Toyota, understanding this hidden layer can be the difference between simply reacting to the world around you and actively shaping it to your advantage.
So before the break, we were using the IA3 framework to analyze these examples. We covered issue, actors, and interests. Now I'm curious to explore the remaining three: arena, information, and assets. How do these play out in the real world?
So let's take arena first. This refers to the specific playing field where a company's non-market strategy unfolds.
I see.
It could be a courtroom, a regulatory hearing, the media, social media, or even public opinion at large.
So it's about understanding where the key decisions are being made and what the rules of engagement are in that space.
Exactly. And what works in one arena might completely backfire in another.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Think back to the Novartis example. They had to tailor their message differently, depending on whether they were in court, talking to government officials, or addressing the public. You know, hard data and legal arguments might win in court.
Okay.
But a more empathetic, socially conscious approach is needed to win over hearts and minds.
That reminds me of how companies are navigating the world of social media these days.
Yeah.
It feels like a completely different arena.
It is.
With its own set of rules and risks.
Absolutely. Social media has become this powerful force, capable of rapidly amplifying both praise and criticism.
Yeah, it's true.
Companies need to be incredibly savvy about how they engage in this space.
Okay.
Understanding that one misstep can quickly snowball into a reputational crisis.
It's like walking a tightrope. They need to find a way to participate in the conversation, build relationships, and promote their brand without coming across as tone deaf or insensitive.
And that's where the information element of the framework becomes crucial.
Okay.
It's not just about having information. It's about understanding what kind of information matters in each specific arena.
I see.
And using it strategically.
So it's about knowing your audience and tailoring your message accordingly.
Right.
So data might sway policymakers while emotional storytelling might resonate more with the public?
Precisely. Companies need to be adept at gathering the right information, analyzing it, and packaging it in a way that will persuade their target audience. It's about presenting a compelling narrative that aligns with the values and interests of those key decision makers.
This reminds me of Toyota's strategy with the Prius. They knew they needed to appeal to both policymakers and consumers.
Yeah.
So they used data on fuel efficiency and emissions reductions to influence legislation while simultaneously crafting marketing campaigns that tapped into that growing public desire for environmentally friendly products.
Excellent observation. They understood that different types of information carried weight in different arenas. And they adapted their approach accordingly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about arena and information.
Right.
Now, what about assets?
Okay.
How does a company's existing resources play into its non-market strategy?
So assets refers to the resources a company can leverage to achieve its non-market goals. These can include tangible assets, like financial resources, infrastructure, or technology, as well as intangible assets, like their reputation, brand image, relationships with key stakeholders, and even their expertise in a particular field.
So it's about identifying your strengths and using them strategically to gain an edge in the non-market arena.
Exactly. For some companies, their most valuable asset might be their strong brand reputation and loyal customer base. For others, it might be their deep industry knowledge or their close ties with government officials.
I see.
The key is to understand what you bring to the table and how you can use it to advance your non-market agenda.
This is making me think about those companies that have built their entire brand around a certain social or ethical stance, like Patagonia, for example, with their commitment to environmental activism.
That's a great example. Patagonia has effectively turned their values into a core asset, attracting a loyal customer base who share their commitment to sustainability.
I see.
So their activism isn't just good PR. It's a strategic business decision that reinforces their brand identity and differentiates them from competitors.
So they've aligned their market and non-market strategies, creating a virtuous cycle where their social activism reinforces their brand, which in turn drives sales and allows them to further invest in their activism.
Precisely. It's a win-win scenario where they're advancing both their business goals and their social mission. And it highlights how a company's values and commitment to social responsibility can become a powerful asset in the non-market realm.
This framework is really helping me see how companies are operating on multiple levels, strategically using their resources and influence to shape the world around them. But before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your perspective on a key question that came up earlier. What are some of the fundamental differences
between operating in the market versus the non-market environment?
That's a crucial question. And the article points out some important distinctions in the market environment. Money is the primary currency.
Right.
Companies compete on price, quality, and innovation.
Okay.
The focus is on transactions
Right.
and maximizing profits.
Right. It's that classic like supply and demand dynamic.
Right.
But the non-market environment seems to operate on a different set of rules.
Exactly.
Okay.
In the non-market realm, information is king.
Okay.
It's about persuasion, influence, and building relationships.
So it's less about transactions and more about building long-term relationships and alliances.
Precisely.
I see.
And while competition is a driving force in the market, collaboration is often key in the non-market environment.
Right.
Companies often need to work together.
Building coalitions with other stakeholders to amplify their voice and influence policy decisions.
That's like that old saying.
Yeah.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Right.
It seems like that applies even more in the non-market world.
Absolutely. And another key difference is the importance of consistency and authenticity in non-market strategy. In the fast-paced world of markets, companies often need to be agile and adaptable, shifting their approach as needed to stay ahead of the curve. But in the non-market realm, flip-flopping on issues or appearing opportunistic can seriously damage your credibility.
So it's about building trust over the long term.
Exactly.
Demonstrating that you're genuinely committed to the issues you're championing, not just pursuing short-term gains or reacting to public pressure.
Exactly. Stakeholders can quickly sniff out insincerity or ulterior motives. Building and maintaining trust is essential for any company looking to effectively navigate the non-market environment.
This is all incredibly insightful. It's like we've peeled back the curtain and revealed this whole hidden world of strategy and influence.
It is fascinating.
But before we move on to our final example and wrap up this deep dive, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors for supporting this episode. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been unpacking this whole idea of non-market strategy. How companies use social and political savvy to gain an edge.
It is fascinating.
Like we've discovered a whole new dimension in the business world.
It's definitely a dimension that's gaining increasing importance, as the world becomes more complex and interconnected. Companies can no longer afford to operate in a vacuum, solely focused on their internal operations and bottom line.
And we've seen some compelling examples so far.
We have.
Novartis navigating the complexities of intellectual property rights in India. Toyota turning environmental concerns into a competitive advantage with the Prius.
Absolutely.
Patagonia building a brand around their social activism.
Great examples.
It's clear that non-market strategy isn't just for big corporations or global players. It's relevant to companies of all sizes and industries.
That's a crucial point. Whether you're a startup or a multinational, understanding and engaging with the non-market environment is essential for long-term success.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to touch on one final example on the MIT Sloan Management Review article. Accor Services, a subsidiary of the French hospitality giant, Accor. They provide employee benefit solutions like meal vouchers and childcare subsidies. Can you tell us how they've successfully integrated market and non-market strategies?
So Accor Services is a great example of a company that's found a way to create shared value, benefiting both their business and society at large.
I like that.
They've done this by strategically aligning their corporate social responsibility initiatives with their core business objectives.
So it's not just about philanthropy or ticking boxes. It's about finding those win-win scenarios.
That is.
Where doing good is also good for business.
Exactly.
Accor Services has a long history of partnering with NGOs to address social issues like hunger and childcare access, particularly in developing countries. These partnerships have not only built goodwill and enhanced their reputation, but have also provided valuable insights into the needs and challenges faced by their target market. So they're gaining a deeper understanding of their customers' lives and using that knowledge to inform both their product development and their non-market strategy.
Precisely.
And they've cleverly leveraged this positive social image and their strong network of partners to advocate for policy changes that benefit both the company and society.
That's right.
For example, they've been actively lobbying for the expansion of pre-tax kindergarten voucher programs.
I see.
Arguing that it will not only benefit working families, but also stimulate economic growth and job creation.
Right.
It's like they're using their non-market clout to push for policies that also create new market opportunities for their business.
It's a brilliant example of how these two realms can work together.
This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener for me.
Good.
It's made me realize that there's so much more to business than just products, profits, and market share.
It's true.
It's about understanding the broader context, building relationships, and using your influence to create positive change.
I think that's a great takeaway from our deep dive into non-market strategy.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that businesses are not isolated entities. They operate within this complex web of relationships, regulations, and social expectations.
And as we've seen, companies that can effectively navigate this well, those that can anticipate challenges, build alliances, and shape the rules of the game will be the ones that thrive in the long run.
Absolutely. It's about moving beyond a purely transactional mindset and embracing a more holistic view of business, one that recognizes the interdependence of business, society, and the environment.
So as we wrap up, what's the one key message you want our listeners to walk away with?
I'd say it's this. Don't underestimate the power of the non-market environment. It's not just background noise. It's a dynamic force that can shape your company's destiny.
That's powerful.
And by understanding and engaging with this force strategically, you can create value not just for your business, but for society as a whole.
That's a fantastic way to end our deep dive.
Thank you.
I encourage everyone listening to start paying attention to the non-market moves companies are making. You'll be surprised at how much is happening beneath the surface.
Absolutely.
Like a whole new game is being played, and the more you understand the rules, the better equipped you'll be to navigate this complex world.
Well said. Thanks for having me on the deep dive.
It was a pleasure having you. And to our listeners, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper.